Welcome to week 4 of Gospel-Centered Foundations. In this session, we'll be talking about the problem of sin. Now, when I was in college, I worked at a different church with students, and there was this girl, an exchange student from Germany, and she was not a believer, but she would attend our group for several months, and she loved asking difficult questions. And one night, we're at someone's house, and while most of the students are playing in the pool, she wants to have this conversation. And so I'm standing there with the pastor who mentored me, and the girl says, "There can't be just one true religion." And after several minutes of conversation, my pastor said to her, "But nothing else deals with the problem of sin." It was a simple yet profound statement. Everyone sees something wrong with the world. We just blame different things. I can look back on my old college courses. I had some classes in the social sciences, and I heard this common theme that people are basically good, but it's society that messes them up. This raised the question for me, how are we individually good, but collectively evil? It didn't make much sense to me. If we don't understand the problem of sin, we'll reach out for the wrong solution. Christianity gives us an explanation for sin and a solution to it. Let's go back to where sin started in the Garden of Eden. Before creating Eve, God gave Adam a command. He told him he could eat of any tree in the garden except for one, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But after Eve is created, Satan comes to them in the form of a serpent to tempt them. And he questions Eve, and he says, "Did God actually say, 'You shall not eat of any tree in the garden'?" Well, in reality, God didn't say that. So Satan is already lying when he asked the first question. Maybe the question threw her off because in her response, she seems confused about what God actually said. And she says, "We can eat from the trees in the garden except for the one in the midst of the garden. We can't even touch it." But this was also false because God never said they couldn't touch it. And then Satan tells her, "You will not surely die. God knows when you eat of it, your eyes are going to be opened and you'll be like God, knowing good and evil." Satan wants her to think that God is keeping something from her. Now, his statement is partly true because if they eat of the fruit, their eyes are going to be opened and they'll be like God, knowing good and evil. They would know evil through experience. We can see something here about deception. The best lies are always wrapped in some truth. Otherwise, we wouldn't believe them. For example, what do they do when you use a $100 bill at the grocery store? They always hold it up to the light and make sure it's not counterfeit. Now, why do they do that? Because a counterfeit looks real. There's a lot of truth in the counterfeit and a little bit of lie. We wouldn't fall for something if it's 100% false. Genesis 3 tells us that Eve believed 3 things about the tree. It was good for food, a delight to the eyes, and it would make her wise. We learn some truths here about sin. First, sin usually meets a practical need. It's good for food and she's hungry. Sin usually meets a real need in our lives, or you wouldn't do it. Someone may feel lonely and they're a believer, but they start to notice that person at work who's not a Christ follower, and they start moving towards a relationship, even though they're not a believer. They're looking for that person to solve their loneliness problem, so they make a compromise. Secondly, sin promises more than it can deliver. For Eve, it was a delight to the eyes and desirable to make her wise. Maybe you've wondered what the big temptation was with the first sin. I mean, fruit, that's what did it. That's what cast all of humanity into sin. But it wasn't just about fruit. It's what they thought the fruit would do for them. They thought it would make them wise like God. Whenever we chase sin, we are looking for more than the thing itself. We're searching for identity apart from God. And after they sinned, it says their eyes were opened and they knew they were naked, so they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. This has always been a strange part of the story. Why is this their response? Well, they felt ashamed because of their sin. I think the fig leaves mean more than simply just covering nakedness, because trust had been broken between themselves, but also between them and God. And sin leads to separation from God, and others, and in some way, the leaves represented that separation. Whenever we fail God and others, like Adam and Eve, we try to cover ourselves. We cover ourselves in good works and good intentions. We try to justify ourselves, saying things like, I'm not as bad as I used to be. I'm not as bad as that person over there, but that's not enough. When Adam and Eve sinned, God gave them penalties, and we are reaping the consequences even today. But instead of simply condemning them, God seeks them out to rescue them. And He sacrifices an animal and makes new clothing for them. And this all foreshadows Christ, how Christ sacrificed Himself for us on the cross. And He offers us new clothing through the righteousness of Christ. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21 says, For our sake He made Him to be sin, who knew no sin, so that in Him we might become the righteousness of God. I'll be praying for your groups this week as you dive into discussion.